Hello and welcome to God's Minute. I'm Pastor Jonathan Conrad, and I am the senior pastor at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Wilmington, North Carolina. Today, we conclude our week's look at the book of Nahum. So let's get to the final passage for the week. Your shepherds are asleep, O king of Assyria. Your nobles slumber. Your people are scattered on the mountains, with no one to gather them. There is no assuaging your hurt. Your wound is mortal. All who hear the news about you clap their hands over you. For who has ever escaped your endless cruelty? So let me ask you to look and think about that last verse. Did you notice how it ended? Did you notice that it ended with a question mark? Now, can you guess the only other book in the Bible that ends in a question mark? That would be Jonah. And guess what Jonah was talking about? Nineveh. Now, in Nineveh, it is God who asked Jonah, why should I not be concerned about the fate of Nineveh? And so we see a God of mercy. And in Nahum, we see a God of justice, and some would say a God of revenge for what Assyria, Nineveh, has done to God's people and to other people around. So that got me thinking about how Assyria is totally alone in its destruction. There is no one to help. There are no victims who feel bad for what Assyria is going through because Assyria has inflicted so much pain on them. And like I said earlier this week, this is a God that we are not used to reading and talking about, but it's still the same God. And to me, as I've said before, this is God looking out for God's people to make sure that God's people know that they are not alone and that God remembers what is done to them. But today, what I want to think about is how Assyria is left alone. Assyria, with a push towards power and influence, destroyed Israel, destroyed Judah, and look where it got them. They were in power for about 15 years before Babylon rose up and defeated them. So they were not in power for very long. And what did it get them? No friends, nothing. There's nothing that will keep people to say, hey, you remember that great nation, Nineveh? Man, what a great time that was. I think about our plight today and the reasons we do things like to acquire power or to acquire influence, and that we sometimes don't think about the damage we do on the way. I remember a church that means very much to me, and they were having a battle between the worship services. Would it be contemporary versus traditional? And what happened was when one side thought they had won the battle, they actually lost the war. Because once the dust settled and the church realized what direction they were going at when it came to music, in the meantime, they lost their pastor. They also lost a half of their members. So what did they get? They got their style of music that they wanted, but now half the people are there. And the church is suffering because their pastor left. So what did they really win? What are they left with? Why do we do the things that we do? If we do it for our own personal gain, I think we end up with a lot more nothing than we expect. But if we do things for the goodness of others, for the betterment of our neighbors' lives, there is so much fulfillment that is there because we don't put ourselves first. We put others. And that is what God calls us to do. Set aside our personal interest, and so we can put in front of us the interests and the lives of others. If we focus on others, God is supportive. When we focus on ourselves, books like Nahum can warn us what happens when we do that. Thank you very much for joining me this week. I hope you have a good weekend. Please stay safe, please stay healthy, and I will see you next week for another edition of God's Minute. You take care and God bless.